Hi again, Nonverbal Comm students. I am talking about Chapter 8 today. This is the chapter on touch, which is also known as haptics, Haptics. This is about page 264 of Nonverbal Communication for a Lifetime, our textbook. Sometimes touch is called zero proxemics, which is kind of silly, but that's okay. That just means bodies coming into contact. Sometimes it's called tactile behavior or tactics. So that's on about page 265. Touch is the most powerful nonverbal cue of them all. It is also the most fraught. It is the most problematic. If you mess up a facial expression, if you make too much eye contact, if you make too little eye contact, if you have a funny walk, if you sit in a weird, if you, all those kind of things could be seen as violations, but there's not a huge sanction for that, right? It's not that big a deal. But if you mess up, when bodies come into contact, that's a big deal. Okay, we have laws about that. That's how big a deal that is. Probably not a single one of us who hasn't messed up or miscommunicated via touch. Maybe we had a weak handshake. Maybe we brushed up against somebody accidentally, or we tripped and fell into somebody. There's things that happen that just are not our fault. But this is something we really need to explore and think about, because it is the most powerful nonverbal cue that there is. Whether it's an affection touch, a touch done to comfort somebody, or the professional handshake, or other kinds of things, like even just showing affection to infants and babies and children who need that for their very physical health. So touch is incredibly, incredibly important. And it's important in all cultures. It's important for all human beings. But different cultures have different rules about it, that's for sure. You already know that, but it just bears repeating. This category or code of nonverbal behavior is incredibly culturally rooted. So if you'll take a look on page 266, we first start off with talking about the touch ethic. When you start thinking about people and their touch or lack of touch, their comfortability with receiving or giving touches, their comfortability with extending a touch to another person, or maybe very uncomfortable about it. A lot of that comes from our earliest lessons about touch. The touch ethic is defined as your preferences for and beliefs about touch. Each person has certain beliefs about touch: what's appropriate, what's not, what's expected, what's not, what's rude, what's kind, what's comforting. And you also have preferences for touch. And a lot of those come from those early experiences, maybe things you can't remember, but it comes from, too, what you were taught in the home, where you grew up, where you were raised, what you witnessed in terms of parents, grandparents, extended family members, step-parents, siblings. Those early experiences affect our touch ethic, our beliefs about and our preferences for touch. Now, you can change, okay? I've seen this happen. Let's say that somebody comes from a fairly non-touchy, non-affectionate family. Doesn't mean they don't love each other, but some families are very demonstrative with touch. Others not so much. It's just different. So if you come from a non-touchy, non-affectionate family, what happens if you marry into a family that is very affectionate? What happens if you are in a romantic relationship with someone who expects, wants, needs a high degree of affection from you, and you're not used to that, or you're not comfortable with that? Well, that can be some conflict, right? But I've also seen it happen where people in a less touchy family marry into or partner with someone that comes from a very touchy, very affectionate family, and it can actually change that person's behavior to becoming maybe more okay about touch or more expectant of it. So the touch ethic can shift. It can shift in the other direction. Maybe you come from a very affectionate family and that's what you learned and that's what's comfortable for you. And then you're in a relationship with someone that is not comfortable for them. Somebody's going to have to adapt to somebody. Maybe you try to meet in the middle. But the touch ethic is an important thing. I think sometimes you have to talk about these things with a partner, and that can be awkward to bring up. You might begin by saying, what did you learn about touch in your family, or what did you witness? Did you come from a family that, hugged each other every time they saw each other, or kind of kept their distance and didn't hug? And, how'd that make you feel? Do you like to get a hug from a friend, or is, hugging just reserved for romantic partners? That's another really interesting difference about people. Some people hug their friends. Other people don't want to be hugged by their friends or don't want to extend hugs to their friends. And right now, with what we're all going through, the hug and the handshake have kind of gone away, sadly. I miss that sometimes, just the physical contact with people, because we're trying to be so safe and so careful right now, and we're at a distance, and a lot of times we have masks on, and it's just a little weird, isn't it? No, it's a lot weird. So we just have to acknowledge that and just push on ahead. A lot of things about touch are changing. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci, the world's, at least the American preeminent disease specialist, said several months ago he thought maybe the handshake was a thing of the past, that maybe that ought to go away. I think a lot of us have become a lot more germ conscious during this period of time, with all the hand washing and the hand sanitizer and all of the warnings that we're getting about trying to be safe and not spread things to people and not get things from people ourselves. So I don't know if the handshake is going to go away. Makes me kind of sad. I don't want a whole lot of things about American culture and our behavior as human beings to change just because of this awful period of time. But we shall see. We don't know yet. Stay tuned. Infancy and childhood is the next section in this chapter, and it's very important because children's very health, physical health, not just mental and emotional health, but their physical health depends on receiving touch and affection from others, particularly their parents. And so take a look at that. The single most touch-deprived segment of our culture, and many other cultures around the world, is elderly. This makes me sad, but the research says over and over again, this does happen. Some people are revulsed by the physical appearance of an elder person. Sad but true in some people. Some people don't want to touch an older person because they appear frail, and the person's afraid they might hurt an elder person. You do have to be careful. You do have to watch that as things change. I've said this before in class, but I had a student several years ago who had the strongest handshake I've ever had in my life. And he shook my hand, and it brought me to my knees, basically. My knees kind of buckled. I have arthritis in my hands. 50% of the American population has arthritis. And so my hands are sometimes very sore. I'm also a craft person, and so I have this weird index finger because I do a lot of crafting with this finger, and so it has changed over time. It's got one of those big nodules on it, and sometimes it's quite painful. It embarrasses me, but I'm getting over it, because it still works. But when I got a handshake from this student, it was so strong. He was a very strong guy. He was a biker. He biked like miles and miles every day, every week. And so I was like, oh, hon, be careful with that handshake because it could really hurt somebody. So you gotta be careful about those things. But anyway, they're doing some interesting pet therapy in nursing homes and in retirement communities because the elderly are touch deprived in our culture. And so pet therapy is kind of helping because the pets aren't repulsed or revulsed by the appearance of an older person. They don't care. It's just somebody's going to pet them. And it takes our blood pressure down and our breathing relaxes. And it's very, very good for us. We need affection from one another. And it's worrisome right now because we're kind of affection deprived right now as all of this scary stuff is happening in the world. And we'll see what happens with that. Take a look at page 272 if you get a chance. There's a spotlight on Research Box. I found some interesting research on parents and student athletes and coaches' view of appropriate touch between coaches and players. Coaches and athletes. And so take a look at that because that's kind of interesting. Heslin's categories, starting on page 273, Heslin's categories, you need to know these backwards and forwards. And this will kind of help you. Now, one thing, the first category, functional professional, I think is unfortunately named. Functional, I get. Professional is confusing for y'all. Don't think of the professional handshake that gets extended to people as being in this category. Functional professional are those touches that people have to do because it is their job to touch your body in some way. Health professionals, dentists, massage therapists, these people have to come in contact with your body because their job or their function is to come in contact with your body. So the next category is social polite. That's where the professional handshake comes into play. In normal times, I would practice with my students shaking hands for the professional handshake. Not everybody knows how to do this. We don't do this anymore, but we will probably take it back up again because you don't want to assume that people have a great handshake. We've all probably gotten that silly little grab you by the fingers. That's called a fingerella. That little, let me just grab half of your hand or fingers. A lot of times women get extended those kind of handshakes. A lot of times women give other women those kind of handshakes. Stop doing this now. Just take my word for it. Gentlemen, shake the hand of a woman the same way you would shake the hand of a man. Extend her the professional courtesy and respect the same way you would with a man. She can take it. Just don't grip the crap out of it like, you're trying to prove how strong you are. Just recognize your own strength. So the handshake, the professional handshake, the credibility in a handshake is in the palm. Maybe you've gotten one of those cupped handshakes, where there's air in between there and it feels really weird. It feels kind of creepy. Don't do that either. Okay, the credibility is in the palm. So when you have a good handshake, you want it to be palm to palm. You want the thumb hook, okay? And you want as complete and as good a grip. You want a fairly firm grip, but don't, beat the life out of them. But that's the handshake. So a handshake is about palm to palm. Thumbs need to hook, okay? And a little bit of a grip and a little bit of a shake and then release. And so there's research on this. So work on your handshake. Don't let the handshake go away. I know there are social handshakes that are sometimes a little lighter. I still get the ick over those, but that's just me. So I want a professional handshake every time, even if it's in a social setting. I just don't like that little fingertip thing. It just kind of conveys disrespect, or like you just don't think you can give me your full hand, and that's troublesome to a lot of people. Okay, take a look at Heslin's categories. The biggest problem with Heslin's in Heslin's categories is when people take a friendship warmth touch and interpret that as either love intimacy or as sexual arousal. They jump categories. So a friendship warmth touch is extended from friends. It is to convey warmth and affection toward another person. But the research says, and guys, please don't take offense, but the research since the 1970s and every decade forward says that in American culture, men tend to misinterpret women's friendship warmth touch as being more, as meaning more, as meaning, oh, she wants me, or this is a love intimacy or a romantic touch. And so read that stuff because that can get us into trouble. For women, heterosexually speaking, don't use touch as a tease. It's not fair. It's not nice. It's not appropriate. So don't touch someone in a love, intimacy, or a sexually arousing way and then pull back and say, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I was just being friends. I was just playing around. None of us likes to be teased, and so touch can be used poorly and as kind of a power play. So I'm going to stop right there about halfway through the chapter on touch and pick it up in a little bit. Thank you, everybody. Bye.